Hello, and welcome back to the AusCannaPodcast, where we unpack cannabis through the lens of patients, science, and the people pushing this space forward here in Australia. I'm your host, Christina McMullen. Today's guest is Chase, founder of Umami Seed Co, a breeder and pheno hunter with over 20 years of experience working with cannabis genetics and cultivation. Over that time, Chase has built a reputation around precision, consistency, and long-term thinking. His work is focused on developing cultivars that can perform across very different environments, expectations, and markets. Through Umami Seed Co, he's now expanding globally, supplying products in medical and recreational markets, all while navigating the realities of regulation, scale, and quality control. Chase brings a perspective that sits right at the intersection of genetics, access, and innovation. And that's exactly what makes this conversation so important right now. Because here in Australia, we're at a bit of a tipping point. Patients are more informed than ever. The industry is growing fast, but there are still real gaps when it comes to access, education, and consistency. So today, we're going to get into all of that. What's actually working, what's not, and where things could be heading next. But before we get there, if you've got a question that you've always wanted me to ask a guest on the show, this is your reminder to send it through to AusCannaReviews@gmail.com. Make sure to include your mailing address, because if your question airs, I'll be sending you a goodie bag. All right, let's kick things off with my favorite part of the show, the not so rapid fire questions segment. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Favorite place you've traveled?
Man, it's a hard one. Let's see. Honestly, favorite place I traveled to is Japan. I've been all over Japan, and I lived there briefly when I was growing up. My dad had a business there, so got a particular affinity for Japan, and so probably my favorite place I've traveled and one of my consistently favorite places on the planet to go is Japan. Mostly Tokyo, but as well as up in the north in Hokkaido. Just incredible food, great snow, big snowboarder, and it feels like a second home for me.
One word your team would use to describe you.
Persistent. And if it was 2 words, it might be annoyingly persistent.
I love it. Biggest risk you've ever taken?
Biggest risk I ever took was probably leaving a well-paying salary job and moving up into the woods with essentially a hope and a dream of creating the business that I currently operate.
I love it though. Sometimes you got to be crazy like that.
Yeah, I distinctly remember calling my dad and asking for his advice. And his advice was the same as most people at the time, which was, please do not do that. And I remember I responded to him and I said, I appreciate your feedback. This was really more of a gauge your opinion kind of a question, and this is happening. So I appreciate your stance, but I've already made up my mind. Essentially was the discussion.
I love it. You're like, I'm not seeking approval.
I'm an adult now. I value your opinion, but this is happening. And at the end of the day, I'm glad that I made that decision.
Something you're still trying to master?
Well, growing plants is a never-ending process and a saga. And we learn more new every day, how to optimize, how to, find different methods which can create, slightly different results, potentially more desirable. There's, then a never-ending tinker, to getting things dialed in. And recently I've gotten into the automation and software side, building up bespoke systems to do data entry, collection, and all of that. It's a very deep rabbit hole, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. I mean, there's nothing I enjoy more than taking a complex problem that has no clear solution and then finding a solution and making it work. It's just insanely gratifying.
What's your go-to way to reset after a stressful day?
I like to go to the driving range. Probably my favorite activity outside of anything cannabis related is golf. And so that is my reset. I enjoy the peace and quiet, the view, grass, fresh air, where my only immediate concern is trying to hit this little ball in a certain direction. And that helps turn off the brain. All the pressures and anxieties of life and business just sort of melt away for that, that amount of time, an hour, whatever it is, to kind of get back into the zone.
Do you usually go to the follow-up question, just curious, do you usually go to a driving range, or are you somebody that does the whole okay, we're renting the cart, we're going to go do our whole 9 holes or 18 holes? What's a typical golf
Oh yeah, no,
outing for you?
I play a lot of golf. Golf is my number one go-to hobby. And so I play golf pretty much 4 to 5 times a month, a full 18 holes, with my buddies. I've got a group we play with, like I said, at the very least every week. And then I do go to the driving range, practice probably another 4 to 5 days a week. And I have a golf simulator that I built in my garage during COVID.
One cultivar you wish you had created.
Oh, wish I had created. I mean, I guess the cultivar I wish I had created is, some of the cultivars I haven't created yet. I mean, the last thing I'd want to do is take someone else's work, I mean, there's plenty of varieties that are just discovered, and sort of the origin unknown. But I'm proud of every cultivar I've created. And yeah, I guess my answer would be the best, the cultivar I wish I had created is something that I haven't yet discovered.
Best advice you've ever been given.
Let's see. All right. This is, I don't know if it's necessarily advice, but it's kind of just a life, life lesson to some degree. But you can have it all, just not all at once.
That's true. It's always a give and take in life, right?
Yeah, very much so.
What's your favorite terpene?
That's another good one. My favorite terpene. Well, honestly, I think my favorite terpene is not a single individual terpene. It'd be a blend of them, as well as some other esters and aldehydes. One of which it's completely escaping me. And I literally just learned about it very, very recently. And it was, essentially it's like the umami terpene. And I really wish I remembered the name off the top of my head. I was in Vegas at a dispensary that's growing a bunch of my varieties. We were doing some taste testing and looking at new things. And, the director of the grow was like, oh, I have, we did a bunch of lab tests of your umami gear, and they all have this one particular terpene that we've just started identifying. And it's the umami terp. Or at least it plays a large role in the umami terp. And I cannot remember the name. It was a very obscure name. I'm going to have to try to figure that one out. I mean, it would take me at least like 5 or 10 minutes to pull that up.
Because we're talking umami, we're talking about like a very savory, rich kind of almost meaty, kind of earthy. That's what you're talking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like sort of the umami blend of, meaty, savory, I mean, the rough translation from Japanese to English, umami is like deliciousness, like the essence of like deliciousness, which again is a really difficult thing to accurately describe, but there's a number of different flavors that play into that. I mean, the other thing that people don't realize is, terpenes are in a class, they're essentially one aspect of the orchestra, right? If you were looking at a symphony, you'd have the strings, and those could be all of the terpenes. And if you're looking at just terpenes, then, you're not really looking at the entire picture, right? Because there's the woodwinds and the brass, and the, percussion, and there's so many other elements, which is these esters and aldehydes and VSCs, the volatile sulfur compounds, and all of these that work together. And then each of those specific ratios is what creates the smell and the taste that we interpret from, from that combination. And individual terpenes are interesting because they don't smell. Some of them are incredibly, potent and smell a lot, and others don't have hardly any smell at all, right? Certain terpenes, an entire gallon, are, you might pick up a very light note, but it's not anything as potent as, a few other ones. Like, I mean, there's a few that a single drop of these terpenes will clear an entire room. They are horridly offensive. And so that terpene percentage isn't necessarily indicative of terpene potency, as someone would experience the amount of smell, right? The volume of smell.
I totally agree, because especially when you're somebody like myself who decides that there are certain terpenes out there that really agree with me over time, obviously I've been able to train my nose. And so when I open a jar, a lot of times I can smell terpenylene when maybe somebody next to me can't smell it at all. And to me, I'm like, oh, wow, it's so overwhelming. How do you not smell it, kind of thing?
Yeah, that's true. Especially as your palate adapts, and as soon as you start to thoroughly understand like what of that smell is, this part or that component or the other one, you can start to pick those apart. Then, just like you said, you'll smell a certain variety, you can smell, like, you'll know, oh, this probably has this terpene, this terpene, this terpene, this is likely, related to or a descendant of, this class of plants. And, this, like this is one that I really agree with, that I really like. So it's, good chance that I'm going to enjoy this one, even though it's different. It still has elements of something that, that I appreciate and that I like.
Yeah, the little nuances of cannabis. Last question. And this is a listener submitted question from Robert in Gisborne, New Zealand. And he wants to know, legacy. What does that word mean to you?
Legacy, I mean, the way that I use legacy, especially in the US, is really, who, like, a legacy farmer or a legacy operator, in that kind of context, would be someone who's engaged with the plant for an extended period of time. It's really the simplest way to define it. And it almost always correlates with people who were active in the space before any form of legalization or medical. And then that kind of bleeds in, because, if you were operating under the medical space, like, that would still be a legacy operator. Really, it's like an early adopter in the space. You're an early participant in a time when participation was probably not looked upon with the same view as it is today.
Actually, a really great way to phrase it, to be honest.
I think it means something different. It does mean something different to everybody. Everyone's allowed to have their own kind of opinion on what a legacy operator, legacy breeder, legacy grower means. But that's how I interpret it, and That would be my definition.
Well, Chase, thank you very much for playing rapid fire with me. I enjoyed that thoroughly. I want to dive right in because I'm full of questions for this episode. So I want to start at the very beginning because you're somebody who's been in cannabis for 20 years. So it gives you a perspective that most people don't have because you've seen it evolve and shift and scale. But you're somebody whose focus has stayed mainly anchored in genetics. So I want to kind of go back to the start of that. Like, what drew you into this side of the plant and what made you stay with it?
So the first plants I ever grew um, all came from seed. They were from a bag of flour that we had gotten, which was seeded. So we saved the seeds and, hey, let's try our hand at growing. Why not? This seems fun. We got started. I grew these plants. Of course, they were non-feminized seeds. And so there were males as well as female plants in that first round. And one of my friends who had a little bit more experience in the space than I was like informing me that, oh, you need to kill the male plants because they'll pollinate the female plants and you'll make seeds and this and that. I was quite upset because I had spent a lot of time and energy to grow these plants and I didn't want to just kill them. It's a big accomplishment at, a young age to actually have gotten to this point. And so I remember I killed all of them except the best one that, in my opinion was the best one. And then I collected some of the pollen and I made some seeds that very first round of growing. And then that was it for me. Like it triggered something in my brain that was like, oh, I'm going to create varieties and make new ones and different ones. And now I can find these other seeds and I can breed these within. And like then all of the gears really started turning.
I love it. So you're saying like basically from the very beginning, it was like, aha, this is what was meant for me. Like you just got bit by the growing bug, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to say, I don't love weed. I'm in love with weed because this was a passion for me at a very young age. And I think the first time it was between 15 or 16. I can't remember exactly when I started growing. I was a sophomore in high school. And I was obviously not allowed to grow. I grew up in a very conservative part of Utah. And I was born into a Mormon family. And so you can imagine the horror that my parents suffered finding out that, their eldest son was not only smoking weed, but was trying to grow weed, in mine and several other close friends' backyards.
I love it. I love it though. I mean, look, I started consuming cannabis roughly around the same age. I definitely wasn't growing it, but I was in Texas, in South Texas in the 90s, loving my brick weed. And I look back on that and I'm like, oh my God, why did I like it so much? Like, what was I drawn to? Like, on some level, it was just not, at least you were growing it and could see the potential. Whereas I literally was, I wish people could understand what brickweed was back in the day, but like, I look back on it and I'm like, what was my attraction to that? It was so ugly and it smelled so bad. Like, it was not a pretty plant.
Yeah, no, certainly not. And I mean, I was very fortunate because even though it was, this was 2000 and like early 2000s, um, I went to a small private school, and there was essentially a direct network of brothers and older brothers who had kind of gone on the same path I had, where as soon as they graduated high school, would move out to Northern California and start growing. And so we had kind of a direct channel of, it certainly wasn't amazing weed, but it was incredible, for the time period and the location that we were in. So I did get to see a lot of different varieties, even that early. we did have brickweed, and there was Canadian beasters and a few other things. But after that, we started getting the humble. No one called it humbled. We didn't even know how that was spelled. It was humble. Uh, those humble pounds were coming down.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, like I said, I started on brickweed, and it wasn't until early 2000s when I was in Vancouver. Um, and I met somebody that I referred to as the guy who was like boutique bud before I knew what boutique bud was. And I went from brickweed to beautiful BC bud that just blew my mind. And I was like, how is this the same plant? There's no fucking way. And I think that for me was the moment when I guess I shifted my perspective on what the plant could potentially look like and what it could potentially produce. Because again, coming from brickweed to BC bud was, I don't want to be like it was mind blowing, but it genuinely was.
No, it's a stark difference. When you're going through essentially lawn clippings with a bunch of stems and seeds, and you're just sifting out the seeds and the stems for, these pieces of leaf debris, and that's cannabis to you versus an actual flower, that might actually look really pretty and have some color, maybe a little purple or green. It smells like not, compressed hay or whatever else, brick, some brick, like the hazy brick, would kind of have a little bit of a floral smell, like depending on how good like the Oaxaca was, we'd get like kind of a jack terp a little bit. And it was so long ago, it's like hard to, was that actually from Oaxaca? It's just like, oh, this is from this area. This is Panama gold. The name game nowadays, there's so much renaming. Like you think back in the day, that wasn't extremely commonplace. It's like, how much of that memory is, number one, how much of the scent memory is remotely accurate, especially after all that time, and then how much of it was just completely wrong because we were told, the baseline was incorrect.
Oh, you're so true. You're so true. I mean, I guess, how do I want to phrase this? Do you think cannabis genetics, like the space right now, is built more on trust or just blind faith?
I mean, probably a little of both. Like, from a genetics producer standpoint, I would say the vast majority is on, initially it probably is built on blind trust, and then it builds into faith, because in this business, you really have, like, you can't, like, Umami's been around for 10 years now, and Umami would not have existed past 6 or 9 months had what we provided either been, either very sub quality or just not what it was described to be. Because people are very smart, they'll talk, and if it's not up to par, then you're going to know about it. So I think, early on, there's definitely trust that needs to be built. But here, someone who's been producing genetics for years, there's a good reputation, the community will trust that these people are, the genetics they have are what, or the genetics they provide and have the names on it are actually the real genetics, right? So these are people they're acquiring genetics, they're confirming the validity of those genetics more ways than one, assuring, that the stock, like the breeding stock that they're using is true, and at the quality that it needs to be, and then they're combining that with other varieties, which again are true and accurate. And of course, there's a little bit of funny business here and there, depending on a million different things. It's obviously, it's very easy to mix up 2 plant tags. Like, you write the 2 tags down, you put the 2 in, and you can't remember, oh, is this one on the left or the right? Like, and when plants are really small, especially if they're very closely related, it can be significantly more difficult to identify the differences between them. Once you get the habit of it, it's easier to see, the leaf pattern, the structure, the shape of the leaf, the texture of the leaf? Does it have deep ridges, small ridges? Is it flat? Is it wavy? How wide are the fan leaves? How many leaves? How long is the petiole? Like, there's a number of different things, but really, I think, but it's all built on trust initially, and then you sort of prove that over time. Because of course, no one's created a classification system, that's not seemingly corrupt, right, by big business or someone looking to create some sort of IP collection funnel, where they can take all your genetic information and create some sort of map and detect this to that. And, that's all well and good. We'll see where that goes. There's a number, once you have enough data, there's a number of genetics that'd be very curious to find out, like, what they actually are. But the nice thing with, social media, the internet, now that cannabis is more and more legal, we're starting to see people come out of the woodwork and can actually put the pieces together of what is this, what is that, and, everyone's still alive. So we can ask the people who created OG Kush. Like, we know with essentially like a 99% surety what OG Kush is, where it came from, because all of the stories line up. And we didn't have that 10 years ago. Same with like ChemDog and some of these other like early origin varieties.
No, I agree with you in the sense that it's definitely an area that is constantly evolving. And it is hard to know beyond a reasonable doubt what you have sometimes, right? Because you're absolutely right. It's easy to mix up a label here and there. It's easy to kind of get lost in what you're doing, so to speak. But you're right in the sense that the space is evolving.
Yeah, it's going to be really, the next decade in this space is going to be very interesting. We're rapidly entering the course of events that people had predicted years and years ago. And this is going to become big business, and it's going to be craft. It's going to be, David versus Goliath, and what are government regulations going to look like? It's the Wild West. Who knows what's going to happen? It can be United States. They're looking to potentially make seeds illegal and changing the Farm Bill. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is crafting import and export regs and finding ways to work together. The U.S. is continuing just to build this under lock and key sort of a system. We're going to do rescheduling. Okay, cool. Well, you've said that for years now, and nothing's changed, and nothing seems to be changing. What's the deal? I don't think most people realize what rescheduling in the United States means. By no means is rescheduling to Schedule 3 a good thing. It might not even be a parallel move. So it's going to be very interesting to see where things go, which obviously makes running a business difficult, but it's exciting. We do have to be dynamic, and that's part of the reason why we've slowly expanded our footprint from just solely in the U.S. Now we have facilities in Canada, in South America, in Austria, Germany. We're in negotiations in South Africa. We're in Israel, of course, Australia, Austrana, Thailand is going to be coming up here shortly. So, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. And I think after this year, we should be very well positioned to tackle any sort of boulders that are getting our way.
Talking about global expansion, from a genetics standpoint, do you ever have to compromise on genetics when you're trying to bring them into different countries?
No. And I guess I could preface that by saying that really comes down to each individual operator, and just how persistent they're willing to be. Because, for example, if there was a compromise on genetics, then, we essentially, umami, the flavor over everything, that the ethos is there is no compromise. It either is or it isn't. And so for us, that means if it has the Umami brand on it, it has the Umami logo on it, it's something that's generated and powered by Umami, it's going to hit a certain level. And if it doesn't meet that level, then it can't be a part of the program, for instance. So if you have two options, option A is do nothing, or option B is to send in the fourth string quarterback, I would maybe just opt to do nothing, as opposed to knowingly put forth something that is subpar.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night when you're talking about global expansion?
I mean, the regulatory hurdles and dealing with the bureaucracy of multiple different countries and languages and rules and regulations. And when we're dealing with rules that were written by bureaucrats in an office who've never consumed or done, like they have no sense of how this business, or for the most part, any business works. So the way they write some of these rules and regulations have no basis in reality and make our life complete and utter nightmare. And it's something that could be solved by simple, like Q&A, or maybe having an advisor or something. Like there's ways to solve these problems. But when we come up against things that just like they're applying some standard ag practice to hemp and to cannabis, and you're like, what, one example would be, like in certain states in the United States, you need to test your seed batches for purity, essentially. And they want to make sure that your cannabis seeds have less than 5% or 10% of an impurity seed. And it's like, well, we're not row cropping these in a field where there's weeds and other things that are going to get caught in the combine. And all of a sudden we have 5 different types of seed in this bag. There's just like things like that where I understand why that was started originally, but either it's stupidity or laziness that causes the result where they're going to apply this. And you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't really applicable here.
I was gonna say that's crazy. I get what you're saying. Yeah, if it's growing outside, you're doing mass crop. Like I get but cannabis has come a long way, and for the most part, it's grown in a very controlled environment.
Yeah. And so it said, there's certain rules, and like some are overly annoying, like the seed cleanliness rule, and others are shockingly, lax, where for a phytosanitary certificate out of the US for hemp seed, I had assumed was going to be a quarantine process and maybe some sort of biological sample or, pathogen analysis or something along those lines. And as it turns out, it's none of those things. The Department of Ag will show up and look at the bag of seeds that you plan to send, and will thumb through the bag essentially and go, yep, that looks like 1,000 seeds, and maybe they'll weigh it or something. But and then it gets approved. It's like a visual inspection. It's wild. The left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. None of it makes sense.
It is wild, sir. It is wild. I just want to circle back to phenohunting real quick, because obviously that's something that you have done a lot of. Most people only ever see like that final product, the outcome. They don't see like the volume and the patience and the level of decision making that goes on there. Can you kind of, I guess, slow down the process and kind of explain it to somebody who's pretty naive for phenohunting?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, should I start with like the idea of the seed and then making the seed and then hunting the seed, or you just want to skip to, we have these seeds, what's the process from taking, a pile of seeds to now finding something that's going to be on a pharmacy shelf?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Chase. My listeners cover a wide array of knowledge. I definitely have growers that listen that would just want you to kind of jump to the juicy stuff, but I also have patients that have no clue about cannabis beyond what they're looking at in their plastic tub that they get from their pharmacy.
Yeah. So we won't go too extensive on the sort of initial bits, but from the day that I sit down with my spreadsheet and I decide what variety is going to be bred with another for the goal of these are the seeds I want to create. This is what I want these to do or to look like. There has to be a goal and a vision for the creation. So we come up with the goal with the vision, and then we apply the different varieties. That we select the different varieties that I think are going to give us the highest chance of success of hitting that goal. And then of course that is looking at potential, like what the market demand is going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. Because from the day I make the decision on, okay, number 1, number 7, number 4, this one, these go into the breeding chamber, it's about 18 months until I have seeds which are ready for distribution, maybe closer to 2 years. And a big part of that timeline is phenohunting and validating the cultivar and the selection. So the way that'll work is we'll grow, for a proper pheno hunt, from my perspective, the kind of minimum amount of seeds that I like to grow is between 50 to 100 of a single variety. And that process will take usually 120 days, between 100 and 120 days on average for that first round of pheno hunting. We're going to go through a number of the different varieties. We're going to try to start picking out the outliers that align closest to my original goal of what I had hoped that these varieties would be able to do, achieve, perform, what have you. And then those varieties need to be grown several different rounds, because for the first portion of the plant's life from seed, there's something about cloning and the asexual propagation sort of settles the genetics. And I don't know the scientific term for this, but we will see variation in the batches when you grow the first batches from the seed, and then after you cloned a few generations, those changes will diminish, and then you'll have a very consistent output of that phenotype. So the first 2 or 3 rounds of clones off of any given seed that you sprouted typically are not indicative of what that variety is going to look like forever. It can be, but it's not necessarily the case, because there's been, on more than one occasion, we've grown a variety right off the rip. It's incredible. Can't wait. This is a winner. We make a bunch of clones. We roll it into production. And all of a sudden we're looking at a variety and we're like, wait a minute, what is this? Did this get mislabeled? Like, this isn't the same one. And then you check back, you look at the logs. No, everything's the same, but something's triggered, some clonal variation, some gene shift in that sort of acclimation process to its new environment over time has shifted it. And usually it's not for the better. Typically, it will start to lose some of its more desirable traits. So it is a process of growing these varieties, multiple rounds, letting the genetics settle, quote unquote. And then from that point, we're growing those top varieties that we've identified through a few rounds to slowly start to hone in the 1 or 2 very best phenotypes. And I'll tolerate maybe up to 3 phenotypes of any one specific variety. And they must be very unique and different in their own right in order for there to be a 1, 2, 3 of a certain variety. I'm almost exclusively looking for just one, just the absolute best one, which, subjective to whomever, but the best most exemplifies what I had in my head, a couple years prior when I was on my computer, dragging cells in Excel and matching things up.
I was just about to ask, how do you stay objective when you're seeing so many expressions?
So I've built a pretty thorough sort of checklist for me, like things that, like bare minimum metrics that these varieties need to hit. And so that helps eliminate a huge chunk of the different varieties. And then assuming that narrows the population down. So if we say we started at 100, we'll reduce that down to probably 30-ish. And then after we let the genetics settle, right, quote unquote, we're down to, ideally we're in the like 10, 15 range. And then it just starts, we run down, essentially run down the list. Like, what if this one doesn't have this aspect? Okay, it's gone. This one has this, but it doesn't have this, it's gone. And then we work our way backwards essentially until we hit flavor. And then if we've got like 4 or 5 that check all the boxes, they look great, they smell great, they yield well, they grow well, they're visually appealing, then which one tastes the best and smells the best? And which one has the best flavor translation? Because there's plenty of varieties that smell and look amazing, and then you go to smoke them, and for some reason, the flavors isn't there. It's muted, it's soft, it's harsh, it's peppery. And then the variety that looks almost identical to the other one smokes incredibly smooth and is delicious, and the flavor translation is spectacular. And then there's an easy selection where we're not picking one that doesn't taste good.
If you had to put it simply, what separates a cultivar that's good from one that's actually worth building our brand around?
I mean, so a cultivar that's good, there's a lot of cultivars that are good. And the easiest way to describe the difference, especially for me, is when we're pheno hunting, we already have a lot of cultivars that are good. Like, I already have a lot of 8.5s and 9s on the roster. And so if something else is going to join the team, it essentially needs to kick someone else off the team. Because there's only so much room, there's only so many varieties we can grow at one time. And either it's going to be an heirloom variety that, of course, has like made its way into pop culture and deserves to be preserved forever, like certain OG cuts, chem cuts, Sour D, Blue Dream, like some of these varieties, which of course are spectacular. It's fun I like taking those varieties and then taking something new and unique and different that I've created, mixing that, so we get this massive differential in the origin point of these two plants, and then seeing the result. That's always really fun. But cultivars, especially for us, like the new varieties that we're trying to make, they have to be amazing. Like, it needs to be a 10, because we already have, there's not space, and there's plenty of things that are good. We need great. We need phenomenal. Like, if I'm sitting there and we're trying to go through, we have 5 or 6 varieties, and they're all like, they're all good, but none of them are amazing. Like, that's a fail for us, because I'm not going to put something that's just, it's good. It's good enough on the menu. It's not going to work. That's not what we do. That's not why we do it. It's not the ethos of the business. That's not the passion. I want to make something that's just like, wow. I want everyone that looks at it, smells it. Wow. What is this? What does that smell like? You go back into the bag 3, 4, 5, 6 times. You've never smelled that smell before. There's not words in the English language to describe the smell that you're smelling. You're trying to piece it together. Has this element and this, and like that. That's umami. Like, that's the vibe.
I love it, sir. I love it. It's an experience.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like, I mean, my sort of silly, if you ask me what the purpose of life is for me, I would argue the purpose of life is flavor. And the deeper definition of that is the purpose of life is experiences, to experience. To be is the purpose. You might be the universe experiencing itself.
From a patient perspective, here in Australia, we don't have a recreational market. It's a strictly medicinal market. So most patients are looking at things from not necessarily a flavor or an aroma perspective, although I definitely encourage them to take those things into consideration. They look at it more from, did this work for me or did this not work for me? How much of that do you think comes back to genetics versus everything that happens kind of after?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a patient myself, a current patient to this day, I've been a patient in the state of California for like 15 years. Yeah. So as a patient in the state of California for the last 15 years, I mean, the reason I got into this was, I mean, one of the biggest reasons I fell in love with cannabis way back when, that was so interesting for me, was it let me sleep. Because I, to this day, do not sleep very well. And as anyone can tell you, if you don't sleep well, you don't feel well, you're groggy, you're this, you're that. It causes a million issues downstream. So being able to sleep is paramount. And so one of the reasons that I was so interested in the flavor aspect of it was I started to see different flavors of cannabis would create a different effect for me. Because it's not so simple just to say, oh, this is a sativa, it's going to energize you. This is an indica, it's going to put you to sleep. That's not how that works. What really dictates the effect more than anything else is the terpenes and the esters and the aldehydes and the other phytocannabinoids that all work together to create the effect. Because I'm sure patients in Australia or everywhere around the world have tried distillate. And if you smoke just a raw distillate, the high is it's hard to describe, but it's like uncharacteristic. It feels odd because it doesn't have a direction, as opposed to something with a high level of terpinolene, which, I mean, everyone's body chemistry is different, so this certainly doesn't apply to everybody. But there are studies that have proven that terpinolene specifically does, in most people, increase alertness and energy levels, and some white papers have published some interesting data on that. So there are certain terpenes which do have specific directions to the effect. So if you're looking for anxiety relief, or something that's going to help you sleep, or something that's going to help physically calm you, maybe increase your appetite, those varieties mostly are going to be ones that have the same terpene profile. And so if you've got two varieties which may have totally different parents and a different cannabinoid level, but the terpene profile is roughly the same, and that terpene profile helps for whatever specific issue you're trying to address, then that's kind of how you pick the variety wherever you're acquiring your medicine from. So it's an easier indicator on, if this has a high level of fenchol, and the high levels of fenchol and like myrcene varieties are really calming for me. And so I'm going to go with that one. Even though I may not have ever tried this one specifically, the name is not something I'm familiar with, but I am familiar with the terpene profile, and my body's familiar with the terpene profile.
I think it's fair to say that patients are often feeling the results of like decisions they'll never see. Like as a breeder, do you guys take on some like a responsibility there that people don't talk about?
I mean, honestly, the nice part about being in like the breeding space is that there are enough other operators who produce seed for their specific goals, right? Like I get to be the flavor guy because there's other people who are like the potency guy or the CBD guy or like the, this family company or that one. So there's enough different people who are growing seed, producing seed, and have all the bases covered. So at no point do I feel like any patient is getting left behind because no one's producing something that like fits for them. I'm sure there's a patient somewhere that does feel left behind, and I'm sorry, please reach out to me and let me know if I can help. But, I think for the most part, we have, like, I personally feel like I have a ton of flexibility and freedom because that's not entirely on my shoulders, right? There's hundreds of others who have taken on the reins of high levels of, specific cannabinoid profiles or type 2 varieties or type 3 varieties or CBG or, high potency period. Like, those are all covered. So we get to work together, and then the menu comprises a number of varieties produced by operators all over the world, kind of crafted their different speciality. And then patients have a number of options, and most people would probably like to have a more energetic one in the morning, something more calming at night. You've got, a few different varieties to choose from. And then my thought is, like, if it tastes good, all the better. Because I'm sure, I don't know what children's cough medicine tastes like anymore. So I haven't been to the pediatrician in quite some time. But it was this awful, like, pink bubblegum flavor way back in the day. And it was never good at all. It was just chalky and it was horrible. I thought, like, how come they can't make this taste even remotely good? So there's no excuse on the cannabis side for producing flower that, doesn't taste good. Like, the whole experience should be a good experience. It should look good. It should smell good. It should taste good. It should be appealing. It should be exciting.
Ah, Chase, I love it though. Like, you nailed it in the sense that, yeah, as a kid, you get bubblegum flavored penicillin or cherry flavored or whatever it is, and it tasted like shit, but you still took it. And you're right, it's part of the experience. Like, why can't we factor in some of those things into cannabis? Because if you're looking at it as a medication, then on some level, yeah, man, why can't we improve that flavor?
In my opinion, we can. And we do every day.
Um, do you think at times maybe the industry is moving too fast, but not always in the right direction?
Yeah, certainly. Um, Obviously, one glaring thing we've seen in the United States, kind of backtracking on the Farm Bill and the hemp side, which I can't say we didn't see this coming, because the minute there was a THCA loophole and every gas station in the country could legally sell THCA flower, that was going to rub people the wrong way, who have enough power and political motives to change things. Usually, again, not for the better. So that's an issue. It seems like every year there's something new and different, and we have to pivot, shift, and change. And so for me, trying to design what does umami look like 5-10 years down the road is substantially more difficult. Just because it is new and turbulent. But with something that's so new as an industry period, it's to be expected. And I'm along for the ride. Anyone who's shocked and confused, I'm just like, where have you been? It's always been like this. It's always been crazy. Like, you need to learn to adapt, or this is not the business for you.
Best case scenario, where do you see Unami in 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think really continuing to do what we do. I want to perfect super craft quality at scale, because there's a massive problem with production, scaling, and quality. And it doesn't matter what you do or what industry or where you are. It just becomes orders of magnitude more and more difficult to maintain quality as you scale. And the price continues to increase, and all of a sudden your economies of scale, you've lost that benefit. And so what I want to do is perfect or get substantially better at that. And so we can deliver really, really high quality, unique, special products to people all over the world. And whenever you see, the Umami brand on a product, you'll know immediately the quality of those goods. You're familiar with it. And so it's not something you really need to think about. If you see that, that's something that's going to work for you. That's something that's desirable, something you want. And then that will allow me to continue breeding, creating new varieties, I mean, there's an infinite number of varieties to find with an infinite number of flavor combinations. And I want to continue to go down the rabbit hole and find new, more different, unique, like a lot of times we find like the LaCroix version of a flavor, the LaCroix version, like hint of Skittle, or like, single Skittle dissolved in water, where you kind of be like, yeah, that has like a bit of a lime terp, like a little bit, you close your eyes, you can kind of smell it. But if you continue to work down that line, eventually you might find something that is substantially more like lime, like intense lime, or like so perfecting flavors that we have is going to be really fun. And then just like finding new, different complex flavors that, again, we don't have now, don't exist, and, don't know they exist because you've never tasted something like that, which is the whole umami vibe. It's the blend of flavors that come, the 4 or 5 different flavors that come together to create something new and different.
I love it, sir, because I am definitely somebody that's all about experimenting with new flavors and new flowers and new effects. I'm just drawn to it because I think every flower has its own little subtle nuances. And the longer you sit with them, the more you kind of understand them. Um, to play devil's advocate for just 1 second, though, what do you say to people who are like, nah, I'm over that. Like, you're breeding everything to death. Like, why can't we just go back to the classics?
I mean, everyone is allowed their opinion. And if you think that, then that's cool. The nice part, again, I kind of talked about this earlier, there's enough breeders and growers and operators who provide sort of the whole spectrum of things. So if you want classics, guess what? Greg from ChemDog has a brand, and they have the original chem, and they grow it on the regular, and you can go get that. Same with like Marty down in Florida with the OGs. Or like, Josh DOG has his original Ghost OG, like the original OG cut that came, it's California way back when it started, this massive wave, like that is available in flower form and hash rosin. You can go and get that. And it's accessible. So we have all the options available to us. And if you want a certain product, then, it's probably there. So they're like, oh, you're overbreeding, you're doing this, you're doing that. Well, it shouldn't bother you what we do, because we're not negatively impacting the people who are doing what they do best. In fact, we get to work together, right? Like I do collabs with Josh, and like we've got a collab with like ChemDog. We're doing, a couple different things. So like we're going to mash the flavors together. So if you're a purist and you only want those, well, maybe you try something that's in the middle. And if that's not for you, then that's all good. But maybe we'll create a new class of people who really like the blends, where they like the old school stuff. They don't love the new stuff, but the combination is like right up their alley.
You're absolutely right in the sense that, well, there's enough people out there creating enough stuff that there should be almost something for everybody. And you're right in the sense that one of the things that makes this space great is that you can collaborate with some of those OG strains.
Yeah. And like, I get, like, I hear a lot of times like, oh, we need to be breeding landrace varieties. You need to bring landrace back into the mix, and a lot of these different things. And I'm just, there's certain points on that I agree with. Like from a preservation standpoint, we absolutely should be, taking these genetics and preserving them the best way we can, because like extinction is a massive problem. It shouldn't happen, especially nowadays. Like we have the means to like help avoid that happen. So let's do that. So preserve these genetics. If you want to breed with it, again, there's plenty of straight land race people who are breeding and creating S1s, and continuing to populate the lines, and that's awesome. We should do that. But my immediate thought is like, okay, well, we don't breed. If you're breeding championship dogs, you don't go breed them with coyotes, to create like a better dog. See, I don't see anybody like going out and foraging for like wild bananas and propagating those to like create a better, different banana. there's a wild plants. Like I think 99% of the people who are like, oh, you should grow landrace plants. It's a fantasy. They've never grown a landrace plant. Most of them there's nothing inherently special about them. There's not a unique terpene profile. There's not a crazy hardy and vigor and all of this stuff. Like, no, we're taking that work has already been done, because in 60s, 70s, 80s, like they were taking all of the landrace and we're breeding them into finding the ones that were the strongest and the biggest and the fastest and the healthiest and like the most purple, the most, this and that, like the highest levels of THC and the terpiest ones. So a lot of that legwork has been done, and we have those genetics, and that's what we're working with. Like, if both your parents were D1 athletes, there's a good chance you're going to go pro. It's not a guarantee, but you or one of your siblings is likely got the option to maybe go D1, maybe go pro. Like, it's relatively simple. It's not always the case, but I want to take the two best, most amazing things that I could think of and put them together. And some of it's a shot in the dark, sure. But a lot of it's, just educated guessing. When you've been crafting these varieties for so long, you have a really good idea as to how they perform. Like my male, for example, I know exactly how it's going to perform with anything that I cross it with. And that's why I use it so often, because it's bulletproof. And it gives me a very consistent outcome of accentuating and improving the traits of the female plant, while not sort of passing on a lot of its own, aspects.
Chase, this has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot.
I'm glad. Yeah, I could talk about this forever, but not stop talking, because this is the thing that I have done and will do until the day that I die. This is my true great passion. I remember growing up and thinking, like, everyone's got to find their thing, or at least wants to find their thing. And for some people, it's really difficult. It takes a long time to find your thing. And this thing kind of just fell into my lap. Sometimes people ask, how did you know what you wanted to do? And I'm just like, I mean, honestly, this was the thing that I've always done. And I can't imagine doing anything else, even if there was no money in this, which there isn't right now, especially in the US. It's not spectacular. But it doesn't matter, because this is what I want to do. And I'm fortunate enough that I get to do it. I get to wake up every day and go into my garden, grow my plants, work with my family. It's a small family business. It's me, my wife, my brother, and my brother-in-law. It's the core team. And I'm living the dream every day. Sometimes it's a nightmare, but for the most part, it's the best.
I think most of us do it for the dream, for the passion, not for the money. I think a lot of us are in this space because, kind of like what you said, it's this weird little calling that we got called to, and we love it. So we keep showing up.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I can pay my bills and keep food on the table, that's like a prerequisite to anything. And I don't have to have a second job, which I did, for a long time. But I definitely remember the day that I no longer had to work anything and I could do Umami 24/7. And yeah, obviously I feel incredibly fortunate that I continue to be able to do that, and then have been able to expand, meet amazing partners all over the world, and slowly expand the footprint. And now, like I said, this year is going to be the first year that a lot of people, especially international, are going to have a chance to try these varieties, because we're going to be doing distribution in and around Australia, exporting into to Europe. So the first medical drops will be going out in the fall, or early to mid fall is the hope for this year.
Before we wrap up, where can people follow your work and stay up to date with what you're building over there at Umami Seed Co?
The best place to find us is our website, It's umamiseedcompany.com or umamiseedco.com. It redirects. And that has the links to our YouTube channel, Discord, Twitter, all the other social medias. If you've got questions, if you're curious, you want to hear more about Umami, we have a lot of information that's coming out on the YouTube channel. There's a number of, podcasts and presentations and things on how we grow, like basic SOPs for cleanliness. And, I like to share a lot of this info, what tissue culture is, how to do that, how to sprout seeds, how to make sure clones are clean if they're coming in. A lot of it's on the grower's perspective. And then we try to do a lot more things on the consumer side as well, on like how to roll the best joint, and like how to detect flavors. We're trying to add a lot of media this year. So if you're interested, you want to learn more, YouTube is going to have a lot of stuff coming out. If you want to engage with us, like on the regular, Discord is where we spend a good portion of time. We've got an awesome community where people who grow, smoke, consume, whatever are on there. There's a ton of free game for, different cloning methods and SOPs and sort of the wealth of knowledge of Umami is in there. You can ask people questions on, what varieties they like the best and what terpenes. And so if you want to crowdsource a bunch of information, and people who, sort of live, sleep, eat, and breathe Umami.
I love it, sir. Your YouTube channel sounds fabulous. I'll make sure that is in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah, should be good. Like I said, trying to ramp up content this year, and YouTube is one of the few places it seems as though we're explicitly allowed to showcase everything.
I love it. Education, something that we definitely need more in this space.
Yeah, try to make it educational without being too boring. So I can get, it can get a little stale every once in a while, but that's my fault. I get too deep into the weeds. Haha. Terrible. Just horrible pun.
I fell for it though. Chase, it was an absolute pleasure chit-chatting with you.
Thank you so much. Really, really happy that we were able to connect, and really glad to be a part of it.
And that's a wrap for this episode. I want to thank Chase for coming on the show today and sharing his perspective. I think this is one of those conversations that really gets people thinking a bit deeper about what's actually behind the flower they're consuming and why genetics matter more than most people realize. As always, if this show resonated with you, I'd be forever grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review or share it with someone who might need it. You can also support the show directly at buymeacoffee.com/AusCannaPodcast. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, surround yourself with people who don't just clap when you win. They open doors, drop your name, and help you build the damn stage.